Good evening all and welcome. Hospitals, a place where life begins, life ends, and everything in between. Join me tonight for these chilling stories, as it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. It was a Tuesday, but one of those indistinguishable, unremarkable ones. Just another grey, damp day in Rochester, UK, not New York. That morning, something in me snapped. I dragged out the ladder, filled a bucket, and decided to do the job that I'd been meaning to do for a really long time, and the one that no one else in my family cared to do. Clean the windows. They had practically grown opaque with years of grime, and I hated looking out onto these dingy windows to make the days look even more grey. It had to be done. I'd barely started, sponge in hand, 1 foot near the top rung, when my phone rang. Of course, it was balancing precariously in my jacket pocket, and instinctively and stupidly I grabbed for it. Next thing I know, I'm losing my balance and land, with my arm first on the ground, the sky spinning above me, and hot, white pain radiating from my left arm. My phone had landed inches from my face, still ringing. I was taken to the Rochester General Hospital. I'd never been inside before, though I'd driven past its brutalist exterior 1,000 times. It looked like something from another era, and I suppose it was, ugly in a way that felt deliberate. I'd never liked it. As they wheeled me in, I noticed how the automatic doors moved with a sickly slowness, like the building itself was reluctant to administer me. And the smells hit me, that sour plasticky odour of sweat and antiseptic that never quite leaves old hospitals. The linoleum floor was cracked and discoloured, the overhead lights buzzing with a faint flicker, casting yellowish shadows that clung to the corners. It felt like the entire place had been forgotten by time, like it didn't want to be remembered. After x-rays and an awkward, painful setting of the bone, they gave me a grimy private room on the 3rd floor. I was exhausted, hurting, and just wanted to sleep. The TV was on when they brought me in, some local news reruns playing to no one. I fumbled with the remote and turned it off. Silence. It was dark at this point, and all I wanted to do was sleep. It had probably been one of the worst days in my life, and that's when I heard it. A baby crying, soft and distant, sort of muffled. It didn't come on at once, it sort of faded in and out, like bleeding through waterlogged walls, and a woman's voice just barely above a whisper. Shh, shh. The kind of voice that you use to soothe your baby to sleep. But something about it made me feel on edge. It would stop, then minutes later it would start again. Sometimes closer, sometimes further away. The rhythm of it made it worse, like it was pacing, like they were circling the ward. And for all I knew, they might have been. After about half an hour of this, I pressed the call button, which, I might add, was extremely difficult with my only good hand, and a tired-looking nurse in green scrubs came in. I asked her if someone had brought a baby in overnight, maybe a young mother recovering. She shook her head. No babies on this ward. This floor's mostly for ortho and recovery. I'll take a look if it helps. She left and I was alone again. And the crying started up before she'd even made it down the hall. Closer this time. Maybe she was in this passageway. My skin went cold, and I pressed my back deeper into the creaky hospital mattress and stared at the ceiling listening. Eventually the nurse came back. Nothing, love. Checked the whole wing. No one in any of the side rooms. You probably heard something on another floor. The old buildings echo weird. She smiled at me like it was meant to comfort me. It didn't, but I nodded anyway. What else could I do? I turned the TV back on for background noise and drifted into a shallow, medicated sleep. The crying didn't return. I was discharged a few days later, and life moved on. Years passed. I'd almost forgotten about the whole thing, until one afternoon at my niece's birthday party. My sister-in-law mentioned she'd been transferred to Rochester General. She's a nurse too, float staff, and when I asked her how she liked it there, she hesitated. She said she wasn't sure she'd stay, that something about the place made her feel uncomfortable. I didn't blame her. I mean, it'd been a while since I was there, but I too wouldn't want to work in a place so dingy and grotty. And after 2 beers and a few gentle prods, she leaned in and said almost under her breath, "I think it's haunted." She laughed nervously, but there was no real humour in it. I asked what she meant, expecting the usual hospital lore. But then she said something that stopped me dead. "There's this ghost. They call her the Shush Woman. She's a patient from years ago. Severe postpartum depression. Even psychosis. She smothered her newborn. Then she offed herself on the 3rd floor. I think she's still there. People hear a baby crying, and her voice telling it to hush." I didn't say a word. I felt the blood drain from my face. I asked her casually what ward she worked on. She pulled up the shift schedule on her phone and pointed, "3rd floor, room 312. That was my room. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I felt like I was back on that ladder again, one step away from falling. We didn't talk about it again that evening. But sometimes when I drive past that grey monolith of the hospital, I swear I feel something shift behind the windows, like the place is watching and it remembers me. And I still don't know what I heard that night, but I know others have heard it too. And I almost wish I'd never have heard her story, so that it wouldn't leave me so freaked out. This is my mother's story, and she's one of the most grounded, no-nonsense people I know. She worked for years as a night nurse in a small, very old hospital in Scotland. Over her years there, she said the hospital had a presence. A few ghosts, in fact. But one stood out. One that every nurse knew about. They called her the wee girl in the red dressing gown. She had blonde hair and pale skin, and she'd appear at the foot of a patient's bed in the dead of night. Always quietly, never sudden, and always like she'd been standing there the whole time. According to Mum, she wasn't frightening. She never spoke. She didn't need to. She would simply turn and run from the room, vanishing into the hallway every time. Patients who saw her would press the call button and tell my mum, "There's a little girl out of bed, she ran down the hall." They never knew what they'd actually seen, and my mum, along with the rest of the staff, would always say the same thing. "Thanks for letting us know. I'll go find her." But none of the nurses ever looked, because they all knew the truth. If you saw the girl in the red dressing gown, it meant you were going to pass away. Always within a day, sometimes that very night. It happened over and over. Different patients, different wards. Same girl, same pattern. You see the girl, your time was up. She never appeared to the nurses, never to visitors. Only to the dying. My mum said she never seemed cruel, never tried to scare anyone. In fact, she almost seemed gentle, like she had a purpose. She was just doing her job. My mum always believed the girl was a kind of guide, a spirit who knew the way, and it was her job to show others the path. Whatever she was, she never stayed long, but she never got it wrong. So if you're ever lying in a hospital bed late at night, and you see a little blonde girl in a red dressing gown standing by your side, don't follow her. I went in for an open heart surgery. I never expected it to change my life in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. I remember lying in the ICU, barely aware, a breathing tube down my throat. But what I do remember vividly is the male nurse who stayed with me, comforting, calm and reassuring. His presence helped me push through the hardest part of recovery. But here's the twist. There was no male nurse. None of the staff matched the description, and no one knew who I was talking about. Things only got stranger when I was moved into special care. That's when I saw it, a black shadow lingering in the corner of my hospital room. It didn't move. I just watched. I was paralyzed with fear. But then something else appeared, a translucent, glowing form rising from the foot of my bed. Was it an angel? And without hesitation, the figure charged at the shadow and drove it from the room. When I told the nurses, they didn't act surprised. One of them simply said that it wasn't unusual after open heart surgery that some patients see things. Even my surgeon warned me beforehand. You might feel like you're floating above your body. Don't be alarmed. But my battle wasn't over yet. Once I was home, a careless home health nurse who clearly didn't wash her hands after using the bathroom infected me with E. coli. I ended up back in the hospital fighting for my life again. If not for the fast action of the on-call heart surgeon, I wouldn't be here telling this story. And during that second day, things got even more bizarre. Every time my husband visited, his phone, fully charged, would drain completely within minutes of stepping into the room. No explanation, no fix, just dead. So I had him bring me my voice recorder. At 3 a.m., in the still silence of my hospital room, I began an EVP session and I asked out loud, "Who's there? Who are you?" And on playback clear as day, a soft, female voice replied, "I'm a patient just like you, Daisy." The next night again, "Who's with me?" And this time I recognized the voice immediately. "It's Grandmum, Daisy." A chill ran through me, but not fear, peace. In that moment I knew I was going to make it, and I did. Earlier this year, I sat with my father as he passed away in a hospice facility. I'd spent the earlier part of the day with him, then went home to settle into my night routine. But late that evening I got a call. He was showing signs. It was time. My daughter and I went to sit with him. She took the first shift, letting me rest in a recliner near his bed. Somewhere around 1 or 2 a.m. we switched and I sat beside him watching him sleep. My daughter lay down on the daybed in the corner, and the recliner sat empty. Now there's something important you should know about my father. He had died before. When he was a young boy, he had appendicitis. He was living on an island at the time, and they had to boat him to the mainland to a tiny rural hospital which took hours. He crashed on the operating table. He remembered it clearly, floating above his body watching everything unfold. He said he felt sadness knowing that he had died. He watched the nurses hand a scalpel to the doctor, only she dropped it and the doctor shouted at her. Then he woke up in the recovery room. His mother later confirmed, "We almost lost you." And yes, the nurse did drop the scalpel and the doctor did yell. He had no way of knowing these things if it hadn't really happened. So back to that night decades later, in the hospice room, I sat beside his bed. It was quiet and still. About an hour before he passed, I saw something. The recliner, the empty recliner, wasn't empty anymore. I saw my father sitting in it, clearly and calmly, watching me watch him. He didn't say anything. He sat there quietly observing as if he were easing his way into the inevitable. I spoke to him. I reminded him of what he'd been through, and this wasn't unfamiliar to him. "You've done this before," I whispered, "and you came back. But now you've lived a full, beautiful life. It's okay to go." The vision faded, and just before 5 a.m. he died peacefully, and the recliner was empty once more. I never really considered myself someone who believes in the supernatural, at least not in the traditional sense. I've been a practicing pagan for 3 decades, and I tend to be pretty grounded when it comes to unexplained phenomena. But in the 5 years I've worked at a nursing home, particularly in the assisted living facility wing, something changed. Most of what I experienced wasn't terrifying in a Hollywood horror kind of way. It was quiet, subtle, and much harder to shake. It was late one evening. I was alone, finishing up in the dining room. The hallway near me formed an L shape, one long stretch turning sharply left into another. I was near the bend when a door about 4 meters away slowly creaked open. No one was there. I could see through the glass in the door, and there was nothing, not a shadow, not a movement. I tried to laugh it off. Nope, not right now, dude, I muttered to myself, brushing it off like it was just the building settling, until the doors, as if they acknowledged me, began to slowly shut. That's when I ran towards it. My first thought was someone was messing with me, maybe crouched just below the window. But when I reached it, no one was there. No feet, no scuttling movement, no signs of a prank. Just silence. That wasn't the only thing that happened. I started noticing a pattern, small things, always just on the edge of perception. Movement from the corner of my eye that would vanish the second I turned. Objects subtly shifting when no one had touched them. Whispers of a presence that didn't want to be seen, only felt. But the strangest part? It always happened right before someone passed. I began to sense something, not just a presence but a role, like an unseen being passing through. There to guide someone out of this world. Psychopomps, I called them. Spirits whose jobs it was to ferry the souls to the other side. I never saw them head on, only ever from the corner of my eye, but I knew when they were around because it always meant the same thing. Someone's time was up, and within hours, maybe that same day, that patient would be gone. My colleagues noticed too, but they were terrified. Some of them swore they saw figures move through the hallway or objects slide across countertops untouched. One of them even refused to go down a certain hallway alone anymore. They didn't understand why I could stay so calm when I never reacted the way they did. But the truth is, I didn't feel fear. I felt grief, sadness, as if whatever was passing through the building wasn't there to torment anyone but to help. Even so, the door still haunts me, not because it moved, but because it listened. And in a place that sees death every week, something that listens, that knows, that moves when you speak, it's enough to unsettle even me. I work permanent nights. Been doing that 15 years now, and in all that time there's only been one thing I can't truly explain. It was just a regular night shift. Around 2 a.m. I was doing routine patient checks with 2 other staff members. We were in one of the 4-bedded rooms, nothing unusual, just quiet and peaceful. We'd been in the room for about 10 minutes, just finishing up, and about to head out when we heard something, a banging noise. It was coming from the corner nearest the door. We turned around and that's when we saw it. One of the large pedal bins, the kind you had to press down with your foot, and the lid pops open, was moving. The lid kept jerking up and down like someone was pressing the pedal again and again. But here's the thing. No one was near it. Nothing was touching the pedal, and there was a pillow sitting directly on top of the bin, stopping it from opening completely, and it kept banging loud and deliberately. All 3 of us stood there frozen, watching the bin try to open itself. After a few seconds of the rhythmic motion, I stepped forward and removed the pillow, and just like that it stopped. We looked inside the bin, it was almost empty, just a few paper towels at the bottom. Nothing that could have caused it to push from the inside. Nothing that should have been able to make it move at all. We weren't near it when it started. The pillow had been resting there the whole time, and yet after 10 minutes in that room, it suddenly came alive. That room had a reputation. It's one of the supposedly haunted ones, and I've worked nights on that ward for 15 years and never had anything else happen. Just this. And I wish I knew what had caused it. I work in a drug and alcohol rehab facility. It's a 30-day program with a detox unit for the rough first days. I've been here for a little over than a year now, long enough to know something's off about this place. Before it was a rehab, it was a daycare. That's what I've been told anyway. But whatever happened in between those 2 eras left something behind. I used to work night shifts on weekdays. That meant I was there when everyone else was asleep. Just me, silence, and the dark halls. There's this specific hallway that leads to the male dorm. Halfway down it, there's a doorway. No door, just a frame cut into the wall. Every time I'd pass it, I'd feel like someone was standing just to the right of me. Not behind, not in front, just off to the side, like they were waiting for me to notice. That feeling went away after a few months, but I've never forgotten it. Now, the weirdest thing about this place isn't even what I've seen, it's what others have described. Patients, staff, people who don't know each other telling the same story. About the shadow man in a hat. We don't tell patients about him. This isn't one of those inside jokes or stories that gets passed around to scare people. The descriptions come in randomly, months apart. Then, suddenly, someone detoxing will say they saw a man in the room with them. A shadow. Watching. He always wears a hat. Not a ball cap. Something older, wide-brimmed. Always dark, always silent. And always gone when you look twice. I've never seen him fully, but I've caught glimpses, flashes of movement outside the windows when everyone's accounted for inside. The kind of thing you second-guess immediately but never forget. And then there are the doors. Our detox unit has a patio area with heavy double doors, thick and solid. They don't move on their own. But I've seen them blow open violently like someone barreled through them at full speed. But of course no one was ever there. It wasn't the wind, that's not even possible. The doors are far too heavy for that. Another staff member who isn't here anymore once told me they saw someone peek around the corner of the same hallway. The one with just the doorway. They said it was a man. Pale, not a patient, they didn't say a word. They simply looked, then ducked back around the corner like they hadn't meant to be seen. Here's the thing that sticks with me most, though. In the smoking area, we have this rock garden. Every time someone completes the full 30-day clean, they can pick one of the plain rocks and paint it however they want. A name, a symbol, a quote. It's meant to be a reminder of where they've been and how far they've come. But most people don't make it. They relapse or they overdose. These rocks, they're a graveyard. Every painted stone out there could be someone we've already lost. And I wonder if maybe that's why the Shadow Man keeps coming back. Maybe he's one of them. Or maybe he's waiting to see if the next one will fail. When I first started at Coolster General, I thought the worst part of the job would be the outdated equipment or the long, dark winter shifts. The hospital, tucked on the outskirts of a quiet Scottish town, had the look of something that should have been demolished decades ago. Faded red brick, ivy straggling the outer walls, windows looked like they hadn't been cleaned since the 70s. Inside was no better. Dim fluorescent lights that flickered when the wind howled, old lino flooring with permanent footprints etched into its surface, and a constant low hum from something in the walls none of us could identify. Everything about the place felt tired, faded. But I needed the job, and the staff were kind enough. A lot of the older nurses had worked there for years, the kind who have stories about every corridor, every patient room, and weird stains on the walls that simply wouldn't go away. About a month in, I was coming back from the supply room when I found a small knot of nurses huddled at the station, whispering in their half-joking, half-dead serious way people do when something's gotten under their skin. They looked up startled when I approached. "What's up?" I asked, laughing. "You lot look like you've seen a ghost." Morag, one of the senior nurses, gave me a look. "The Shadow Girl's back." "Shadow Girl? Is that a band or something?" But they didn't laugh. One of them muttered a prayer under her breath. Morag leaned in slightly, voice low. "They say it's the spirit of a wee girl who died here. No one really knows when or how. Some say it was TB. Others think she fell down the service stairwell years ago, but she never left. She plays tricks, shows up now and again, especially when someone's about to go." I scoffed. "Right, and let me guess, she wears white and drags a teddy bear behind her?" Morag didn't smile. "She doesn't wear white, she's just shadows. That's why we call her that. But everyone knows the girl. You'll see. I didn't think much of it at first, until 2 weeks later. I was on night shift, quiet one. Just a few post-ops and palliative patients. I was walking down the north wing checking vitals, clipboard in hand, thinking about how tired my legs felt. That's when it happened. Whap! The clipboard from outside room 218 flew, and I mean flew off its hook and smacked against the opposite wall hard. Papers scattered like startled birds, and I froze. The hallway was empty. There was no one around. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked over slowly, half expecting to jump out and yell, "Boo!" But there was nothing. I checked the hook, the door, and even the ceilings for wires or strings or anything. But there was nothing. What could I say? The worst part was no one was around to witness it. A few weeks passed, no other incidents, and I convinced myself it had been gravity or some weird gust of wind through the vents, one of those things. Until the night I stepped outside for a smoke. It was past 2 a.m. The car park was empty, just a few streetlights buzzing overhead. The hospital loomed behind me like a sleeping beast. I finished my cigarette, sighed and walked back in, stomping the cold off my boots. And that's when I saw her, a child of maybe 7 or 8 walking barefoot in a restricted hallway, just a few steps ahead of me, her form partially lost in shadow. No coat, no shoes, just a dark silhouette moving deliberately towards the service stairwell. "Hey!" I shouted, breaking into a jog. "You can't be back here." She turned the corner. I followed immediately, heart hammering. The corridor dead-ended at the stairwell and an old elevator bay. Doors that needed keycard access. I reached it in less than 3 seconds, and there was no one, no sound. I tried the stairwell door, still locked. I swiped my badge and checked the stairway all the way down the next floor. Nothing. The final straw came about a month later. Mr. Faulkner, a sweet but fading man in his late 80s, was in palliative care. We all knew he didn't have much time left, but he was lucid, kind, and always asked how our days were going. That night, I was with him during his final few hours. He kept glancing towards the chair in the corner of the room, not in a scared way, but more puzzled, like he was watching something curious. "You all right, Mr. Faulkner?" I asked gently. He looked at me with glassy eyes and whispered, "Can you tell her to stop kicking her legs like that?" I turned slowly. There was no one in the chair. "Her legs. She's swinging them, kicking the bottom of the seat." I walked over. The chair was perfectly still. No impression on the cushion, nothing. I didn't say a word, I just smiled and nodded. "I'll have a word with her." He looked past me and smiled, his eyes following something unseen. And then he said, "It's all right. She's gone now." And not long after, he passed away. That night I sat in the break room with Anna, another nurse I'd gotten to know closely, and I told her everything. Everything. I expected her to laugh, to tell me I was overtired or losing it. Instead, she nodded slowly and said, "We've all seen her. She's just part of the place. Don't be scared. She doesn't hurt anyone. She just likes attention." "But why? Why here?" Anna shrugged. "Maybe she's alone. Maybe she doesn't know she's gone. Maybe the hospital was the last place she felt safe. I don't think she means any harm. Don't pay her any mind." I didn't say it out loud, but I couldn't shake the image of her shadowed form disappearing down the corridor, the empty stairwell, the clipboard flung like it had been yanked by unseen hands, and the old man smiling at nothing. There have been rumors that Colstead General will be shutting down soon, torn down and replaced with something newer, cleaner and brighter. But I wonder if she'll leave. I think about her sometimes still. wondering if she's watching from the corners, waiting for someone to see her. And there have been times when someone will drop their clipboard to the floor, or I'll hear a chair creak while at work, and wonder if she's playing again. I had died twice after being hit head-on by a drunk driver on my way to work at 7:30 a.m. My body was badly damaged, and while I was terrified for my life, my biggest fear wasn't the extent of the damage. It was the thought of them shaving my head because of the massive cut that ran from the corner of my left eye to the top of my skull. I had long, beautiful hair, and I couldn't bear the idea of it being shaved. Luckily, I had an amazing plastic surgeon who saved my hair, but my hair was a different story. It was matted, encrusted with dried blood, so gross I could barely stand it. But the real horror wasn't just the state of my body, but being trapped in the ICU bed with a clear mind, unable to do anything, unable to move, and surrounded by the sterile, lifeless air of the ICU. There's nothing worse than being awake, conscious, and fully aware of your broken body, but with nothing to do but stare at the ceiling. The ICU back then didn't have TVs to distract you. The silence and isolation only heightened my sense of despair. One night, around 3 a.m., when everything was eerie quiet and still, one of the nurses came in. She had a kind of calm about her that felt almost otherworldly, and she was carrying all the necessary tools to wash my hair, and she told me she was going to clean the blood out of it, since it had been so long. I was more thankful than she could know. She had this soothing presence, like she was sent to offer me comfort at that very moment. It's hard to explain, but the way she worked, so efficiently yet so gentle, it almost felt like a ritual. I still don't understand how she managed to keep me from getting soaked, and how the floor stayed dry. If I'd been washing my own hair, the room would have been flooded by now. We made small talk during the process, and she told me she worked mostly weekend nights. But after all these years, I've forgotten her name. I'll never forget her face, though. Never forget the serenity in her demeanor, and the way she looked at me as though she had all the time in the world. Her presence gave me a sense of peace that I hadn't felt since the accident. Several months later, I limped my way back to work. I started to make regular trips near the ICU for my job in histology, and I kept hoping to run into her so that I could thank her, just to let her know how much her kindness had meant to me during that dark time. But I never saw her again. I stuck my head in the ICU doors countless times hoping to spot her, but she was always absent. I even left a thank you card at the nurse's station, and weeks passed and the card was still there. I thought maybe I'd gotten the name wrong, so I asked the nurses about her, and I described her as best I could, her face, her calm voice, but no one knew who she was. It drove me crazy. I had to find this person, I had to thank her. So I got my dad involved. He worked nights as the security shift supervisor, and everyone liked him. He knew the hospital staff inside out, so I thought surely he could track her down, but he came up empty. The nursing supervisors were just as baffled, and they were also eager to find the nurse who had gone above and beyond for a patient. They asked the nurses working that night if any of them remembered washing my hair, but no one had. They said that it was near impossible to get it done, considering how hectic the ICU was with staff constantly monitoring the patients. Yet my hair had been washed. It wasn't just any nurse off the ward who wandered in. The ICU is a secured area, no one can just pop in. No one could explain how it happened. At that point, the only explanation I could fathom was that she had to be something more than a nurse. I don't know if she was real or if she was a guardian angel in human form, but I do know that the comfort she gave me was more than just physical. It was like a moment of peace in the middle of chaos, something beyond the realm of ordinary understanding. So, wherever she is, I hope she knows how much her kindness meant to me. And since then I've tried to pass that comfort on to others. Maybe that's my way of thanking her, spreading the peace she gave me. I didn't believe in angels before this. I didn't believe in anything beyond what I could see and understand. But now I do. I believe there's more to this world than most of us are aware of. Occasionally we get glimpses of that other side, moments we can't logically explain, but that we feel deeply. And maybe that's the true paranormal experience, when the world bends in ways we can't quite understand, but it leaves us with a sense of awe and wonder. I don't know if what happened to me was truly paranormal, but I know it was extraordinary, and every day I'm thankful for it. When you work nights in the ER, you get used to strange, odd patients, odd hours, and a kind of ever-present exhaustion that dulls your instincts. But there was one part of the hospital that never quite faded into routine for me: the back section of the ER. It wasn't uncommon for us to shut that area down on slower nights. Fewer patients meant fewer open rooms. It was tucked away, isolated from the main flow. One of those rooms, room 35, had a very specific purpose. It's where we moved deceased patients, just until the morgue or funeral home could collect them. It was as private as we can get in a space like ours, and for obvious reason it carried a certain weight. I never liked being back there alone, and especially not in room 35. One night I was restocking supplies in that exact room. It was late, the ER was quiet, and I was the only one in the back wing. I just put away a tray of gauze when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man walk past the open door. I froze. From the brief glance, he looked real, tall, dark hair, walking with purpose, like he knew where he was going. The only problem was, he was heading towards a restricted employee-only door that you needed a badge to open. I leaned out into the hallway to redirect him, but no one was there. I stood in the hall looking both ways, waiting for movement, a sound, anything, but it was completely still. My stomach dropped. I chalked it up to fatigue, night shift brain, and I told myself I was seeing things. But I still grabbed my cart and got the hell out of there. Less than 5 minutes later, the ER was rattled by a scream. One of our nurses had gone into the back section to grab a blanket or something, and she came sprinting down the hallway like she was being chased. She was pale and visibly shaken. She told us she saw someone just barely out of the corner of her eye, and when she turned, she felt a hand grip her shoulder, firm like someone was about to spin her around. She screamed, expecting someone to be right behind her. But she was alone. We reviewed the security footage from that wing multiple times, but there was nothing. No man, no shadow, no figure walking the hallway. But the nurse's reaction, the sheer panic on her face, was undeniable. You can't fake that. I told her about my own encounter, how I saw a man pass by just before her. We compared details. My view had been brief, peripheral, but tall and dark-haired, and it matched what she felt more than what she saw, and it made our skin crawl. Now, ER nurses are some of the most skeptical, no-nonsense people you'll ever meet. We see a lot of grim reality on a daily basis, and most of us are too analytical to jump to ghosts. But that night, everyone believed something was off, and no one volunteered to restock room 35 for the rest of the week. I knew two different people who worked at the same hospital, but about 20 years apart. Neither of them ever met, but what they experienced was exactly the same. The hospital was Edwin Shore in Summit County, Ohio. Originally it was called Springfield Lake Sanitarium. It treated tuberculosis patients back in the day. There's even a cemetery on the grounds for those who never left. By the time my friends worked there, it had been converted into a rehabilitation hospital. Both of them worked in the kitchen. Different years, no overlap, no contact, but both told me almost word for word the same thing. They'd start work early, really early, hours before most staff arrived. The hospital was almost dead silent at that time. Except it wasn't. They described hearing loud banging on the metal prep tables when no one else was near, and worse, something hammering on the roll-down metal doors that sealed off the food service area. Those doors are heavy. It wasn't just some creaking from old hinges, it sounded deliberate, like someone was pounding to be let in or let out. They'd walk around to check, expecting a co-worker playing a joke. But there'd be no one. Not even footsteps leading away. Just the clatter, then silence. It wasn't a one-time thing either. These noises would happen regularly at random. Always in the early morning, always when no one else was supposed to be around. One of them was nearing retirement when she told me of her experiences. The other was a friend I stayed in touch with. Again, 2 people, 2 decades apart, no contact with each other, but the details matched exactly. Unless the hospital kitchen staff somehow managed to keep a prank running for decades, there's no logical explanation for it. The hospital eventually shut down. Explorers kept trying to break in, so the city made the call. They had the building demolished. But the cemetery is still there, and the land is patrolled regularly. No trespassing allowed, not anymore. I also knew someone who worked in maintenance. They were assigned to the outbuildings, structures that hadn't been modernized like the main hospital. One of them was used for patient activities back when it was still a sanitarium, but by the time my friend worked there it was just storage. I'd been inside once or twice myself. It felt heavy, like the air never moved. The maintenance staff reported seeing strange things constantly. The sense of being watched, things moving when no one touched them, heavy thuds like something falling over. Footsteps in the distance, slow, deliberate. But when they go to check, nothing would be out of place. Could it have been an animal? Sure. But the attitude among the staff was always the same. Don't investigate, just move on and pretend you didn't hear it. That was the unspoken rule, but everyone followed it across department, across years. If something was there, it didn't want attention, and no one was brave enough to give it any. I've been a nurse for over 22 years now, and I've worked in multiple facilities, especially during the pandemic. When I took up travel nursing, I've seen the full range of human experience: birth, death, joy, grief, healing, and suffering. Hospitals, they're charged with emotion. If you have any belief in the paranormal, you'll understand why they're such active places for the unexplained. Most hospitals I've worked in so far have had their fair share of odd experiences, anomalies on security footage, strange occurrences. But there's one place in particular, one hospital where I worked for the first 10 years of my career, that was different. It was soaked in something darker, far more oppressive. In the 10 years I spent there, I experienced more than I ever wanted to, more than I've seen anywhere else. Cardiac monitors would flip on by themselves in empty rooms. Patients would describe visions of angels, demons, and strangely, often children. Once I saw a cross shoot off the wall in one of my patients' rooms. A colleague and I witnessed a crash cart move on its own, wheels turning slow and deliberately with no one touching it. There was an entire floor that staff avoided, claiming it was haunted. I ended up sleeping there one night during a snowstorm. After that, I understood why they stayed away. It wasn't just the ghosts, though. The hospital had a weight to it. Like something ancient and heavy clung to the walls. The building itself was only 12 stories high, tucked in a mid-sized Midwestern city. Nothing flashy or historically significant about it, just dark. And the people? The violence? It was worse than anywhere I'd been. 2 of my colleagues were stabbed on shift. I witnessed both incidents. Patients were unpredictable and aggressive in ways that didn't make sense, and I lost count of the amount of times I was attacked. There were rumors, yes, but the energy was undeniable. Even the ending was grim. One employee ended their life by jumping from the 12th floor tower. When I left and moved 2,000 miles away, something changed. Suddenly I could feel how heavy the place had been, like I'd been holding my breath for a decade and didn't know it. I now work in a completely different environment. It's lighter, calmer and peaceful. I don't know if that hospital was haunted in the traditional sense, but it held something dark, and I'm grateful to finally be away from it. Last month in February of 2021, I was hospitalized with an infection in my right lung. It was serious enough that after 3 days of observation, the doctors told me I needed surgery to remove the infection. This happened on a Monday. I barely remember what happened after they started injecting me with anesthesia through an IV. I was in the observation room, shared with an elderly man, bedridden and frail. His labored breathing filled the silence. The door shut behind the doctors, and I was left alone in the sterile, dimly lit room. My roommate was briefly sent for a chest X-ray, and in that moment, the walls felt like they were closing in. I could feel anxiety crawling under my skin like a slow, suffocating wave. I wasn't religious. I drifted away from faith over the years, despite being raised in a mix of Catholic, Baptist, Protestant, and Lutheran traditions. But feeling small and vulnerable, I muttered a brief prayer. It wasn't for anything specific, just a desperate plea for guidance, for something to help me make it through the procedure. I settled back, alone with nothing but my thoughts. I remember staring at the ceiling, my eyes glazed over, when I saw something move from the corner of my vision. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but no. From the far side of my bed there was a figure, human-shaped, but its form was oddly distorted, blurry, like something trying too hard to stay in the shape of a person but failing. I couldn't make out its face, just the vague outline of a being standing still, watching me. It didn't speak and neither did I. It didn't have to. There was an overwhelming sensation of presence, of something otherworldly, something ancient. It was as if its gaze was settling into me, pouring some kind of energy or reassurance into my very bones. That moment stretched on, the air thick and uneasy. I nodded, as if acknowledging the silent exchange, and then as quickly as it had appeared it was gone, and the room felt emptier, the silence pressing in on me more than before. I don't remember falling asleep, but the next thing I knew I woke up 2 days later after the surgery. The doctors told me everything went well, but I don't recall ever being wheeled into it, not a single memory of the operating room. It's as if thought had been erased. Since that moment I've been haunted by what I saw, or what visited me that day. Was it a spirit? Was it a hallucination caused by drugs, exhaustion, fear? My family would be quick to say it was a guardian angel, some divine force trying to guide me back to faith. My father, with his scientific background, would suggest it was my mind playing tricks under the influence of anesthesia. But I don't know. It felt too real. And I haven't even told my family yet. They'd say it was an angel or a sign from God. But what if it wasn't? What if it was something else? I'm not in the medical field, but for a while I practically lived in a hospital. My boyfriend was very sick, so I stayed with him day and night. I slept over, I ate there, I became part of the background noise. One night at 2 a.m, he was finally feeling hungry after barely eating for days. I hadn't eaten either, so I offered to go grab us something from the vending machines in the basement. The cafeteria was long closed, of course, so I went down. Now, I had been in hospitals before, but this felt different. Walking those halls at night alone. It's hard to explain, but it just felt wrong. When I stepped into the elevator, I immediately had the sense that I wasn't alone. No one was physically there, but I felt someone. It unsettled me so much I started recording on my phone just in case. The elevator doors opened and I heard voices, 2 people chatting. But as soon as I stepped out, the voices stopped, like they'd been switched off. I couldn't see anyone in the hallway. There was no shadow and no movement. Nothing. I told myself it was just a couple of nurses walking by, even though there was nowhere for them to go without me seeing them, and still I moved on. The vending machines were in an open area, no corners to hide behind, no hallways branching off, just open space. That's what made what happened next so disturbing. As I was grabbing snacks, I heard footsteps, not mine but someone else's, and I was actually relieved at first. It meant someone else was here, another person. But then I realized I never heard the elevator ding. The only way was in or out. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. Still, I grabbed my stuff and started walking back slowly. Something about that place felt like if I turned around too fast, someone would be right there. Sure enough, I heard footsteps again directly behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. There was nowhere for anyone to go. No room to hide in. I picked up my pace. Just before reaching the elevator, I heard voices again. Soft, whispered and unclear. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but they were right there, right behind me. I stepped into the elevator and the doors closed, but the voices didn't stop. I could still hear them. Right until the doors opened again. Then silence. Later, I watched the video on my phone. Nothing. No voices, just me. I mentioned it to a nurse on the floor, half laughing as I told the story. Her face didn't change. She said, "Yeah, that happens down there. People hear footsteps, whispers. Some have felt hands on their shoulders, some get chased." And then she walked away, leaving me both scared and more curious than I'd been in my life. When I was 2 years seizure-free, I had to undergo a test called the Epilepsy Monitoring Unit. It meant 5 full days of nights in the hospital, where they took me off my meds and forced sleep deprivation to try and provoke a seizure under controlled conditions. My dad stayed with me the whole time just in case, and of course I had a nurse call button if anything went wrong. Now this is where things get hard to explain. I started seeing someone, not physically, but I knew she was there, like I could feel her and somehow see her in my mind. She was a nurse, a young one. She wore an old-fashioned white uniform, buttoned-up blouse, skirt, and one of those square white hats with a red cross. I don't know what time period the uniform came from, maybe the early to mid-1900s. She didn't speak much, but she'd check on me like any nurse would. She asked if I needed anything, made sure I was okay, but there was a deep sadness to her, and I started to understand why. She wasn't there for me, not originally. She'd been watching over a child once, another patient, a young boy who was maybe 5 to 8 years old. She hadn't been able to save him, and I could feel her regret and her sorrow. That room wasn't hers because she'd passed away there, but it was hers because of her failure, and it stayed with her. Then came 2 a.m. I had a seizure, and the next thing I remember, I was coming out of it. My dad was there holding me. A nurse had placed an oxygen mask over my face. When she left the room, my dad told me something I still struggle to process. My heart had stopped. I flatlined. He had pressed the nurse call button over and over, begging someone to come. He thought I was gone, but I wasn't. And after that night, the ghostly nurse never returned. I never felt her again. I think maybe she finally moved on. She couldn't save that little boy all those years ago, but she saved me. And I think it was enough to let her rest. I want to be clear about one thing. I'm a skeptic. Always have been. My worldview has always leaned heavily towards the material cause and effect, science, logic. But something happened in the summer of 2022 that cracked that belief wide open. It started with boredom, just a group of teenagers looking for a thrill. There were 5 of us, 3 guys and 2 girls, myself included. We decided to explore a long-abandoned insane asylum. I won't say which. From the start, the night was weird. Full moon, lightning in the sky, but no thunder. Thick fog pressed against the windshield like breath on glass. The road leading up to the asylum was covered in frogs, dozens of them. It felt like a warning, but we persisted. We reached the place at 1 a.m., scaled the fence, slipped through a broken entry into one of the old patient buildings, and almost immediately something shifted. Within minutes, all three of the guys, big, confident dudes, started saying they felt uneasy. They looked genuinely disturbed. Me and the other girl, Zoe, didn't feel anything like it. In fact, we felt calm. Sedated even. Like the whole place was blanketed in some kind of eerie peace. The guys left, but Zoe and I kept on going. 20 minutes later, we found them waiting outside by the parking lot. They bailed fast. We started teasing them about it, joking around. Zoe's boyfriend, who was from the area, swore he could talk to spirits and started going on about the energy in the place. I told him I'd been here before and never seen anything. That's when Zoe pulled something out of her bag, a Ouija board. At first, nothing happened, but she and her boyfriend tried asking it questions. The planchette barely moved. I figured it was just a gimmick. I was about to walk away when Zoe asked me to sit in. She said it would respond to me. The boy chimed in and said that it would only talk to girls, so I sat down. At first, we asked basic yes or no questions and it moved. I wasn't touching it. Zoe wasn't smiling or messing around. Her expression was blank, focused, and that's when the board really started responding. We asked when the thing had died, and it gave us a year. We asked when it was admitted, and it gave a different year. It gave full words, short phrases, all coherent. It was unsettling but didn't feel threatening. That's until we asked its name. The planchette started darting across letters, C, R, Z, T, and other random combinations that didn't form anything legible. We asked the gender, no answer. The energy then shifted and the board went dead. We packed it up and walked back to the car, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something felt very wrong. On the ride home, I sat in the back seat, hunched forwards, hands in the air. I felt hollow, like something in me had been scoped out and replaced with lead. I didn't sleep well that night, and within months, everything began to fall apart. My senior year was a nightmare. I'd been a state-level swimmer the year before, and suddenly I could barely finish practice. My joints ached. I got sick constantly, had panic attacks, blackouts, and my physical health began to disintegrate, as did everything else. I started drinking, at first just at parties, then at work, then at school. LSD, MDMA, what started as curiosity spiraled into dependence. My mental health hit rock bottom. I had insomnia, paranoia, I was hearing voices and constantly felt judged and watched. I started failing school, stopped applying for colleges and stopped caring. I pulled away from my friends, from my mum. I was angry all the time, cruel, and I didn't care who I hurt. By May of 2023, I lost everything. I wasn't graduating. I was in agony all the time. Psychological, physical, emotional. And then I tried to end it all. I OD'd. I survived. I was institutionalized, put on medication and barely graduated. Started community college and things stabilized. But the darkness never really left. Some might say it was trauma, or addiction, or mental illness. But I've done the therapy, taken the meds, changed my lifestyle, changed towns, changed everything. And it still follows me. Part of me believes the night at the asylum, it marked a shift. Not just in my mind, but in my life. Like something attached itself to me there, or whatever spirit refused to give its name. But something came home with me, and I'm pretty sure it's still here. I've only had one minor supernatural encounter while working on site at the hospital, but it stuck with me. There was always a presence lingering around the pharmacy, something or someone who would always drift through. Most people didn't sense it, and nothing particularly dramatic ever happened. It was subtle, like a strange chill that would sweep over you for a split second before vanishing, or a shadow in the corner of your eye that disappears when you turned to look. But it was enough to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The most memorable encounter, though, happened when I was making IV bags in the hood. This was before they had dedicated clean rooms, so the space was just a large open area, with the hood being the only real clean spot. The area behind me had a steel table, which was too close for comfort. If someone wanted to sneak past me, they'd have to drag against me or bump into the table. That wasn't an issue, at least I thought it wasn't. I was alone and the room felt still. As I focused on what I was doing, preparing a very large syringe, I suddenly felt a cold draft run down my back, followed by the unmistakable sensation of someone brushing against me. My heart skipped a beat. The table behind me shifted as if someone had just squeezed through the narrow space between me and it. I froze, my grip tightening on the syringe. I knew I had been alone when I entered the room, and I turned around quickly to double-check. But there was nothing there, not a soul in sight, no one behind me, no one by the door. The space was still. I should have felt the rush of air or heard footsteps, but there was nothing. My pulse quickened. Was I just imagining it? I looked over my shoulder once more just to be sure. Then the feeling, the weight of the presence that had brushed against me. I spoke aloud, half joking, half on edge. I don't mind you being here or even watching, but please don't bump into me when I'm holding a needle. A chill ran down my spine as I finished speaking. For a moment it felt like the air around me was thicker, heavier. The presence, whatever it was, seemed to linger just out of sight. But nothing else happened. The cold feeling faded as quickly as it had come, and the room returned to its usual stillness. I didn't feel any sudden rush or relief, though. I just went back to what I was doing. But the sensation that something unseen was still hovering nearby didn't quite leave me. I never told anyone about that encounter, but sometimes when I'd work late alone in the same area, I'd feel it again. The cold, fleeting presence, as if something or someone was quietly watching from just out of view, waiting for a moment to pass by. Hey guys, it's Maud here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's journey to the hospital. I certainly did. Hospital stories are honestly one of the ones I love doing, but that scare me the most. Probably because every time I narrate them, I always think, oh man, I shouldn't have eaten that, and feel guilty about stuff. I don't know if you guys get that. I get it whenever I walk into a hospital. It's like, oh man, why do I make bad life choices? Anyway, I really hope I don't end up in a hospital in the near future, and that neither of you guys do either. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed Paranormal Week. If you have, leave some love down below. I do love hearing about it. And we will have another week-long bonanza at the start of May, probably. Haven't really decided what we'll do if we do it. So, your thoughts are always valued if you leave them. If you'd like your name at the end, cool perks and other stuff, feel free to follow me on Patreon or the members page here on YouTube. But I'm going to go now, so you can watch more stuff. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.